Welcome to Ctrl+Talk. This is Anthony and Kate.
Hi, everyone.
Today we're diving into the world of free software, open source, and the history of open source.
And we'll be using an excerpt from the open source guide to help us navigate through it.
You've probably heard these terms before, right? Free software, open source.
Yeah.
But they can be a little mysterious. What do they really mean? Like, why should you care about any of this?
Yeah, that's exactly what we're here to unpack. So we're going to break down some of that jargon and give you some historical context and hopefully show you why this matters in your everyday digital life.
So let's start with a simple example. Imagine you have this app on your phone that you love, but it's missing this one key feature that would just make it perfect. What do you do?
With most apps, you're kind of stuck, right? You can send feedback to the developers, hope they listen, but ultimately you have no control.
Right. But what if you could actually see the code that makes the app work?
Ah, the source code.
Yeah, exactly, the source code. What if you could see that?
Now that changes everything. You could potentially add that missing feature yourself or even fix a bug that's been annoying you.
It's kind of like being able to tinker under the hood of your car, right?
Exactly. And that's the core idea behind free software. It's about giving users the freedom to not only run software, but to study, modify, and redistribute it as well.
About transparency. It's about control, right?
Absolutely. Now, to understand this concept of free software, we need to meet a pivotal figure, Richard Stallman.
Ah, yes, the infamous Richard Stallman, a legend in the tech world.
He is known for his very strong convictions and his tireless advocacy for software freedom.
Okay, so what did Stallman actually do?
Well, in the 1980s, he was increasingly frustrated with the restrictions on software, and so he launched the free software movement. And he was very specific about what free means in this context.
Free as in freedom, not free beer, right?
Exactly. He outlined 4 fundamental freedoms that define free software. First, you have the freedom to run the program however you want for any purpose.
Okay, that makes sense. What about the other freedoms?
So second, you have the freedom to study how the program works, and this means having access to the source code, the blueprint of the software.
So you can kind of see how the sausage is made, so to speak.
Exactly. Third, you have the freedom to redistribute copies of the software so you can share it with your friends, for family, you can sell it if you choose.
Wow. Okay. And the final freedom.
And finally, the freedom to improve the software and release those improvements back to the community.
So it comes full circle.
Precisely. And these freedoms, Stallman argued, are crucial for ethical and social reasons. They empower users, they foster collaboration, and they prevent a handful of companies from monopolizing control over technology.
Makes a lot of sense. So how do we ensure these freedoms are actually upheld? That's where licenses come in, right?
Yeah, licenses are essentially legal contracts that define how software can be used, modified, and distributed. And there are tons of different free software licenses out there.
Sounds a little bit complicated.
It can be a little bit, yeah, but one of the most important and widely used licenses is the GNU General Public License, or GNU GPL for short. It has this really fascinating concept called copyleft.
Copyleft. Sounds like the opposite of copyright.
In a way, it is. Think of it like a chain reaction of freedom. If you distribute software under the GNU GPL, any modifications or derivative works must also be released under the same license.
So it ensures that the software stays free no matter how many hands it passes through.
Exactly. Now, alongside copyleft licenses, there are also permissive licenses. These still grant the 4 basic freedoms, but give developers more flexibility to mix free software with proprietary code.
Okay, so we've got free software, we've got licenses, but we need an operating system to actually run this stuff on, right? That's where Linux enters the picture.
Absolutely. And the story of Linux is truly a testament to the power of open collaboration.
Okay.
So in 1991, Linus Torvalds, who at the time was a Finnish university student, started working on this personal project, a Unix-like kernel, which is the core of an operating system.
And little did he know, this little hobby project would end up powering a good chunk of the internet.
It's incredible how things unfolded. So Linus, he released his kernel code, which he called Linux, under the GNU GPL. Soon developers from all over the world started contributing to the project, combining it with the GNU tools that Richard Stallman and his collaborators had been developing.
So Linux, the kernel, plus GNU tools working together, that's what we call GNU Linux, right?
Exactly. And this collaboration gave rise to a truly free and open source operating system, a viable alternative to proprietary systems like Microsoft Windows.
Okay. Now fast forward a few years and a new term emerged, right? Open source.
Right, in 1998.
Okay.
Some people felt that free software, with its emphasis on freedom and ideology, was scaring away businesses. So they wanted a more pragmatic term to highlight the practical benefits of collaborative development, the efficiency, the innovation, the lower costs that come with sharing code.
Open source was born.
And even though there are some philosophical differences between the free software movement and the open source movement, in practice, they share a lot in common.
Yeah, they both champion transparency, they champion collaboration.
Exactly. And we often use the umbrella term FOX, free and open source software, to encompass both movements.
Perfect. Okay, so now we have a good foundation, I think. Let's shift gears a bit and dive into the specific history of openSUSE.
All right.
It's a tale that involves some twists and turns.
It definitely does. openSUSE traces its roots back to 1992 in Germany. Initially, it started as a localized version of a distribution called Slackware.
A distribution. What exactly does that mean?
Think of it like a pre-assembled meal kit for your computer.
Okay.
It takes the Linux kernel, bundles it with essential GNU tools, libraries, and applications, creating a complete operating system that's ready to install and use.
So it's more than just the raw ingredients, it's the whole package?
Exactly. And openSUSE, over the years, evolved from its humble beginnings to become a major player in the Linux world. It's known for its stability and user-friendliness.
Okay, so back to the history. What happened next?
Well, in 2003, SUSE, the company behind openSUSE, was acquired by Novell. And in 2005, they made a pretty big move. They launched the openSUSE project, embracing a truly open development model.
That was a big step, right? Opening up the development process to the community, letting anyone contribute to the code base.
Absolutely. And that's how openSUSE, as we know it today, was born.
But the story doesn't end there, does it?
Not at all. In 2010, Novell, and with it SUSE, was acquired by Attackmate. Then in 2014, Attackmate merged with Micro Focus. And finally, in 2019, Micro Focus sold eSUSE to EQT Partners, a private equity firm.
Wow, that's a lot of corporate shuffling.
It certainly is, but through all these ownership changes, the openSUSE project remained remarkably resilient.
Wow,
It's a testament to the dedication and passion of its community.
that's pretty awesome. And it continued to evolve, right?
Exactly. In 2014, they introduced openSUSE Tumbleweed, a rolling release distribution that constantly receives the latest updates.
Huh.
And in 2015, they launched openSUSE Leap, which uses a more stable base and gets major releases every few years.
So users have a choice, depending on their preference. Bleeding edge or rock-solid stability.
Precisely.
That's a fascinating history, but where do we go from here?
Well, to fully appreciate the significance of openSUSE, we need to zoom out and look at the bigger picture, the entire GNU Linux ecosystem. We'll explore that in the next part of our deep dive.
Sounds good. We'll be right back after a short break. Welcome back to Ctrl+Talk. So before the break, we took a look at how openSUSE has evolved over the years.
Yeah, we talked about how, even with all the changes in ownership and all that kind of stuff, openSUSE has remained resilient, like constantly adapting to meet the needs of its users.
Yeah, and it's pretty inspiring, right? I mean, this project started small, and even with all of these business dealings surrounding it, openSUSE is still going strong.
Yeah, it really highlights the power of community-driven development. Now, to fully understand the significance of openSUSE, we need to kind of zoom out and look at the bigger picture,
Okay.
the vast and diverse world of GNU Linux distributions.
Okay, so we talked about this term distribution earlier.
Right.
It's like a prepackaged operating system, right?
Exactly. Think of it like choosing a car, right?
Okay.
You have the basic engine, that's the Linux kernel, but then you have all these different manufacturers offering various models, with different features, different styles, target audiences.
So like Debian, Ubuntu, Fedora, CentOS, Arch Linux, these are all different flavors of GNU Linux, each tailored for specific needs.
Precisely. You have distributions designed for servers, for multimedia production, for scientific computing, for gaming, like the list goes on and on.
Wow.
There's a distribution out there for almost every taste and purpose.
That's pretty awesome. It's incredible how this whole ecosystem has flourished, thanks to the collaborative nature of free software development. So who are the people behind all of this? Who's actually creating and maintaining these distributions?
Yeah, it's a remarkably diverse group. You have individual enthusiasts, passionate hobbyists who dedicate their free time to coding, debugging, packaging software.
So it's like a global community of like tech-savvy volunteers.
That's a big part of it, yeah. But you also have students contributing to open source projects, maybe as part of their coursework, learning valuable skills, and making real-world contributions at the same time.
Yeah, I could see how that'd be incredibly motivating for someone just starting out in tech.
Absolutely. And then you have academics using open source software for their research, pushing the boundaries of knowledge, and then sharing their findings with the world.
Sounds like a perfect environment for innovation.
It really is. And surprisingly, even large corporations are heavily involved in free software development. Companies like IBM, Red Hat, Google, Intel, they invest significant resources in open source.
Wait, really? Big companies contributing to free software? That seems a little counterintuitive. I thought they were all about proprietary code, keeping things secret, all that.
You might be surprised. There are actually several reasons why big companies engage in open source development. Sometimes it's about, sharing development costs, reducing redundancy, tapping into a global pool of talent. Other times it's about gaining influence in a particular technology space.
So, like, they might contribute to a project that's strategically important to their business.
Exactly. They might want to shape the direction of a particular technology, ensure that it meets their specific needs. And let's not forget about the public relations aspect. By supporting open source, companies can cultivate a positive image and attract talented developers.
Makes sense. It's like a win-win for everyone involved.
It really is. It's fascinating how these various motivations, from individual passion to corporate strategy, they all converge in the world of free software.
Yeah, it's really cool. It's a testament to the power of shared goals, a common vision, right?
Yeah. Now, what about individual developers? What drives them to contribute their time and their skills, often for, no monetary reward?
Yeah, that's always intrigued me. Why would someone spend countless hours on a project, without getting paid?
Well, there's the classic scratch your own itch of motivation. You encounter a problem, a bug, a missing feature in a piece of software, and you decide, hey, I'm just going to fix it myself. You need it, so you build it.
Right. That makes sense. If you're frustrated with the tool, why not try to improve it, right?
Right. But it goes deeper than that. For many developers, it's about the challenge, the intellectual stimulation of solving problems, creating something useful. There's a certain satisfaction that comes with building something from scratch, seeing your code come to life, making a difference in the world.
Yeah, I could relate to that. There's a sense of accomplishment in creating something, even if it's just like a small piece of a larger project.
Absolutely. And for others, it's about being part of a global community, collaborating with like-minded people all over the world. Open source projects, they foster a sense of shared purpose where everyone is working toward a common goal.
So it's not just about the code, it's about the connections and the shared passion, right?
Precisely. And of course, for many free software developers, there's a strong ideological component. They deeply believe in the principles of software freedom, and the idea that knowledge should be shared and that users should have control over the technology that they use.
Yeah, that's pretty inspiring, this vision of a more open and accessible digital world.
It is, and it's important to challenge a common misconception about GNU Linux. This idea that it's only for, tech enthusiasts, for hardcore programmers who live in the terminal.
Right, yeah, I've heard that stereotype before, that image of the lone hacker in a dark room surrounded by blinking LEDs.
While there is a vibrant community of tech-savvy users, GNU Linux is by no means limited to them. Millions of people around the world use GNU Linux every day, often without even realizing it.
Wait, really? You're telling me I could be using Linux right now and not know it?
It's entirely possible. Think about the websites you visit, the services you use online. A vast majority of web servers run Linux. Google, Facebook, Amazon, Twitter, they all rely heavily on Linux for their infrastructure.
Wow, I had no idea it was that pervasive.
And it goes beyond web servers. Linux is the dominant operating system for supercomputers, massive machines used for scientific research, weather forecasting, complex simulations.
So it's literally powering some of the most demanding computations in the world.
Exactly. And then that's the world of embedded systems. Linux is found in smartphones, smart TVs, routers, cars, practically any device with a computer inside.
So it's quietly running in the background of so many aspects of our digital lives.
Precisely. GNU Linux is far more widespread than many people realize. It's not just a niche hobbyist OS. It's a fundamental part of our digital infrastructure.
That's pretty mind-blowing. So if GNU Linux is so powerful and versatile, why don't we see it more on desktop computers?
That's a great question, and there are several factors at play. One is simply inertia. Microsoft Windows has been the dominant desktop operating system for so long that a lot of people are just used to it. They don't see a reason to switch.
Yeah, I guess there's comfort in familiarity, even if it's not, the best or most ethical option.
That's part of it. And then there's the issue of software compatibility. While there are excellent free and open source alternatives for most applications, some popular proprietary software is only available for Windows or Mac OS.
So, like, if you absolutely needed a specific program for work or school, you might be stuck with Windows.
That's one hurdle, yeah. Then there's the perception that Linux is difficult to use, that it requires, technical expertise. While that might have been true in the early days, modern Linux distributions are incredibly user-friendly.
Yeah, I've used openSUSE and I found it quite intuitive. It's really not had different from using Windows or Mac OS once you get the hang of it.
Exactly, but perception can be hard to change. And frankly, Microsoft's marketing muscle plays a role. They have a huge budget to promote Windows and make it the default choice for most consumers.
Right, so it's a combination of, historical factors, software compatibility, perceived complexity, and marketing.
That's a pretty accurate summary. But despite these challenges, GNU Linux continues to gain traction, especially in specific niches like web development, data science, scientific research.
And who knows, maybe one day we'll see it become a serious contender in the mainstream desktop market.
It's definitely possible. The technology landscape is constantly evolving. With growing awareness of data privacy, security, user control, the principles of free software might resonate even more strongly with users in the future.
That's a really interesting point. So we've covered a lot of ground here, from the origins of free software to this vast ecosystem of GNU Linux distributions. We've explored the motivations of the people behind it all, from individual developers to large corporations.
Right, and we've even debunked some myths about who uses Linux and where it's found.
Exactly. But before we wrap up, I have one more question for you.
Okay.
We talked about the freedom to study and modify software, but how does that actually work in practice? Like, who decides what changes get made to an open source project?
That's a great question, and it takes us into the heart of how open source communities operate. We'll dive into that fascinating process in the final part of our deep dive. Stay tuned.
Welcome back to Ctrl+Talk. We've been on quite a journey, haven't we? Exploring this whole world of free software and open source.
It has been quite a journey, yeah. We started with those basic concepts, source code, binary,
Right.
those four freedoms that Richard Stallman championed.
We traced the rise of Linux, the evolution of openSUSE, even debunked some myths about who uses GNU Linux, where it's found. It's been pretty awesome.
Yeah, definitely. And last we left off, you had a great question
I did.
about how changes actually get made in an open source project.
Right. We've talked about this freedom to study and modify software, but I'm curious, like, who decides which changes get incorporated, into that final product?
Yeah, and that's where that collaborative magic of open source communities, it really shines.
That's
It's
right.
not a free-for-all where, anyone can just make changes willy-nilly. There is a structure, a process that ensures quality and maintains the integrity of the project.
So it's a balance between freedom and responsibility.
Exactly. Most open source projects have a core team of maintainers, experienced developers who've kind of earned the trust of the community, and they're responsible for overseeing the project's direction, setting standards, and making the final call on which contributions get included.
So it's kind of like a democracy, but with a group of elected officials guiding the process.
That's a good analogy. Now, if you want to contribute to an open source project, the first step is usually to fork the code.
Okay.
Essentially create your own copy of the project that you can work on independently.
So you're not directly messing with the main code base. You're experimenting on your own branch. So it's
Precisely. Once you've made your changes, then you submit a pull request.
okay.
Basically asking the maintainers to consider merging your changes into the main project.
Got it. Got it.
And then the maintainers review your code, they'll test it and decide whether it, aligns with the project's goals and standards.
Right.
There's also a lot of back and forth discussion, constructive criticism, collaborative refinement before a change is ultimately accepted.
That sounds like a really rigorous process, but also like a really valuable learning experience.
Oh, absolutely. And this collaborative approach, it ensures that the best ideas rise to the top, regardless of where they come from. It doesn't matter if you're a seasoned developer or a student just starting out, your contribution can have a real impact.
That's really cool. It really democratizes the process of software development, right? Empowering anyone with the skills and the passion to participate.
And that's one of the most beautiful aspects of free and open source software. It fosters a culture of meritocracy, shared learning, where the focus is on building great software together.
Absolutely. So as we wrap up this deep dive,
Yeah?
what key takeaways do you want our listeners to walk away with?
Well, I think the most important message is that free software and open source, they're not just about, technical concepts. They're about values.
Right.
They're about empowering users, fostering collaboration, and building a more, equitable and accessible digital world for everyone.
And even if we don't all become, software developers, understanding these principles helps us make informed choices about the technology that we use, right? And the future that we want to create.
Exactly. And who knows, maybe this deep dive has sparked some curiosity in some of you. Maybe you'll go out and explore open schools
Yeah.
or another FOSS project that piques your interest.
We encourage you to keep learning, keep exploring and keep asking those questions.
Yeah,
The world of free and open source software, it's vast and it's constantly evolving. There's always something new to discover.
absolutely.
Well, from Ctrl+Talk, thank you for joining us on this journey.
Thank you.
Until next time.